Hello, so in this tutorial I want to look at Photoshop animation and we're looking at movement. Then we're going to also look at using tweening or tween as a tool for movement, and finally we're going to look at reversing frames within our timeline to make nice seamless loops. So first things first, the very core basics to movement, which is also the same core basics when shifting opacity in Photoshop. I have my timeline, which you might know from the previous video. I picked up through Window, Timeline, and I've got my first frame in place. So, the very basics of movement, I'm going to leave my egg cracker tool in this position in frame 1. I'm going to make a frame 2, and it's really nice and simple. I'm going to have the 2 layers selected that I'm moving, which is the arrow and the colour behind it. And I'm simply either going to pick the object up, or I'm going to use the arrow tools on my keypad just to slowly shift its way down. Then I'm going to make a new frame. So I've got my 3rd frame now, and I'm going to shift that down further and just check that they are touching. Yes, they are. Brilliant. So if I go back to frame 1 and press play, we're going to see that small movement in action. So just to repeat the process again, we'll bring the egg cracker back up. I'm going to make a new frame, and I want the speed of the egg cracker being pulled back up to be faster than when it was going down. So I'm just going to bring that up higher than between the frames of it coming down. There we go. Super. So that is how you can do movement manually and really simply in Photoshop. But let's look at tweening as a tool for movement. And what tweening is setting the parameters of frame 1 and frame end, and then telling the computer to create the frames in between. So let's look at what that means. I'm now going to create 10 frames without making any movements. So with the duplicate frame button, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in frame 5, I'm happy for this to be position 1, but in frame 14, I'm going to pick up those 2 objects. I'm going to move them up. So as you can see from frame 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 14, everything is the same apart from frame 14. So I've got the movement that I want, and I've done manually between 1 to 4. So from frame 5, I'm going to have frame 5 selected, and I'm going to hold Shift and select frame 14. With those selected and the 2 or the 1 layer that I might be moving selected, I'm going to select the pre-flight menu at the end of the timeline, which is the 4 lines stacked on top of each other. And I'm going to go to a tool called Tween. Aha, so when you first press it, it's going to look like this. It just remembers my previous transforms and tweenings. So had the selection that I had before made. So what I want from this panel is I want to make sure that if I am animating this transform across all my layers, then I can select all layers, but it's actually just those 2 layers that this is going to be performed with. So I'm going to select the selected layers, and the parameters of this transform is the position. I'm not changing my opacity, nor am I changing any filtered effects. Just a heads up that you can perform this between those 2 as well. And then I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go back to frame 1 and press play with my spacebar. And as you can see, Photoshop has worked out where that arrow or that egg cracker needs to be from frame 5 to 14 to get there. So it's done all the hard work for us. Just a heads up, if you want to use tween, you can't use tween with any kind of curved motion paths. All the motion paths that Photoshop can perform are straight linear lines. They can go diagonally, however, it will always be in a straight line. If you wanted anything to be a curved path, I recommend doing it manually like we did with the first 4 frames. And a little tip, if you even create a layer on top of everything and draw a curved motion path and lock it in place, and then frame by frame, if I just switch that on for all my frames, frame by frame you could follow, apologies, that motion path to get the curved action in place, and at the end you could delete that off and then your object will follow that curved path beautifully. So we've got a nice egg crack going on. But I said I was also going to show you making seamless loops. So we've got our egg crack going all the way back up to the top of the page, but we want it to come back down as well. So I'm going to hold Shift and select all of my frames, and I'm going to hold Alt to duplicate that timeline. There is a slight glitch in Photoshop that I cannot duplicate from the very last frame. I must come a couple of frames in and duplicate from there. So now I have a duplicated timeline. Before I click anywhere else, I need to remember that this timeline goes back from the beginning of frame 1, and actually I want it to be a reversed order of my first animation. So while all those new frames are selected, I'm going to go to the pre-flight menu and I'm going to go to reverse frames. So now when I go back to the beginning and press play, I'm going to get a nice tap on my egg. Arrow will pull up to pull back down, and this time I'll even get a double tap because I've got that tap at the end of that timeline as well. So now I have a nice seamless loop going on in this animation. So in this tutorial we've learned how to move things manually frame by frame by using your up, down, left, right cursors on your keypad, or just picking up the object and moving it. You've also learned how to perform movement using the tween tool. I want to remind you that all of these performances are the same for if you were shifting the opacity, which sits at the top of your layers panel. And majority of them also work for any FX filters and effects. However, this does not work for any rotations or rescaling of objects and layers. That will be in the next tutorial. I hope you found this useful and enjoyable when making your next animation. Thank you.